Very, very good evening. A warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. And welcome to the underground cellar at the Innocent Wine Bar in the heart of downtown Athens. We're about a 6-minute walk from the Acropolis and the Parthenon in what is a really buzzing and vibrant part of the city. Yes, it's very close to the Acropolis and the Parthenon, but it's not quite in mad tourist central. It's just a little off that beaten track, and instead in what's a really cool and engaging and appealing part of a city that I discover so much more about every time I come. And that applies to the country as a whole, a country I've now spent close to 4 weeks in. I'll be flying back to South Africa tomorrow. But over the last 4 weeks, if you've been watching the show religiously, which of course you should have, I've been having a terrific time meeting Greek winemakers, trying their wine, and not just discovering how Greek wine has done so much in the last decade since I've been visiting and taken a wine that was promising and in some cases pretty good to wine that across the board, and not just in the white space, is delivering some real knockout stuff. And so today I have the opportunity to meet one of my favorite Greek winemakers who's flown in from Santorini just to be with us today, to drink some of his famous Assyrtiko, but also have a look at wine beyond simply the Assyrtiko of Santorini and see what else is lighting up this magical country from a wine perspective, and to bring in 3 South Africans, one of whom is cheerfully smuggling Greek wine into South Africa. Don't think SARS know anything about it, but he's proved very successful because he bought the Santorini Assyrtiko we're celebrating tonight into the country, and it sold out in 2 hours. So clearly there is a market. I've also got 2 South Africans. Are they visionaries? Are they wine geniuses, genii? Or are they just daft and think Greek sounds rather romantic? Either way, they have planted Assyrtiko. One of them has released an Assyrtiko. And today we find out whether it's just a flash in the pan and a bit of fun, or is there a more serious story to Greek varietals finding a home in South Africa. So all that to come on today's episode of Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, live from the Innocent Wine Bar in Athens. Before we jump into that, though, and meet our very special Greek winemaking guest, here's a quick look at some latest wine news. Well, this is a nod in the direction of the guys from Mullineux. Now, we often think of them in terms of their bubbles, which they do particularly well, but they've got a whole pile of other wines that a great deal of success. And this is a nod to their Red Hill Pinotage, which in the latest Pinotage Awards, the Amsterdam Pinotage Awards, received a top 10 finish. And I think this is now the 10th time that they have finished in that top 10. Now, that in itself is a great achievement, but it also speaks to a broader resurgence, I feel, of Pinotage. A grape that is it an identity crisis? Is it just got so much potential to do so many different things? I'll leave you to make up your own mind, but it is a grape that is got far fewer detractors than it used to, and it's got some really exciting wines being produced at the moment, and I think that Red Hill Pinotage is one of them. So well done, Mullineux, and I'm sure we'll be talking a bit more about Pinotage over the next little while. And now this is a discovery yesterday. I'm currently in Innocent. I dropped into the Wine Tunnel, which is a wine store rather than a wine bar. I walked past it. I'm in the wine business, sort of. I felt an obligation to go in, so in I went, and I discovered a couple of South African wines. On the left there, some Buchenhout's Clough Semillon, and then rather surprisingly, some Glencarlo Sauvignon Blanc. Now, the Glencarlo apparently is brought into the country via a third-party importer and gets distributed through Europe. But as always, there's a little buzz of pride when you see a South African wine abroad. And according to the guys at Wine Tunnel, we're very friendly and very welcoming. Both of these wines do rather nicely, although at 37 euros for a bottle of Buchenhout's Clough Semillon. It's certainly not one of the easy drinking cheaper varieties, but I'm quite happy with that because it says South African wine is well priced and sitting up with some of the better wines in Europe. And if it's selling well at Wine Tunnel, then they've obviously got the quality right. And then this is Dopios. Now, you might remember George Columbaris, judge on MasterChef Australia. Also, far more famously, he was a guest on the Dan Nichols show a few years ago. And I sent him a message, George, where should I come for lunch? He said here, Dopios in fairly central Athens, not quite that Monastiraki tourist area, just a 10 minutes or so walk. And it was superb, really interesting food, lots of classic Greek dishes, but with a bit of flair, a bit of a twist, and not simply for the sake of something different, but really lifting already classic dishes and giving them a bit of a modern spin, accompanied by some Argyros Santorini, because they'd sold out of their Vassaltis. So I tried some other Assyrtiko. I also tried some Viognier from Domaine Skouras. Remember, Dimitri Skouras was on the show with me a little earlier on in the Greek trip. But a great restaurant if you're looking for somewhere nice to hang out and have a lovely lunch in Athens. And then this is happening next week, Thursday and Friday. Thursday in Cape Town, Friday in Johannesburg, together with Joseph Dafana. He's on the left in that picture. We will be co-hosting a screening of Blind Ambition, the cool runnings of wine, the 4 Zimbabwean sommeliers who made their way across to France. And you've probably heard the bulk of the story by now. But if you haven't seen it yet, then do come along on either Thursday in Cape Town or Friday in Joburg if you can get tickets. There are not many left, but we'd love to have you along and come and join us. I'll be there with Joseph Dafana from Blind Ambition. See you next Thursday or Friday. Tickets available at Web Tickets, so please do come and join us. All right, well, let's move over then. Let me say a very warm welcome. Now, you've seen him on the show before, but he was sitting in his vast wine empire in Santorini then, accompanied by a couple of young South Africans. Now we have him here in the cellar. Yannis, a very warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine once again.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me again.
And I have to start off by saying thank you to you, because you got introduced to me by this very shady South African wine character called Ian Naudé. He said, you've got to meet Yannis. He's a fantastic guy. He's really well connected. Not only have I had the chance to try some of your wine with you and get to know you a little, but you have also introduced me to so many winemakers. And I have to say, over the course of the 4 weeks, not only have the winemakers you've introduced me to proved fascinating in terms of my fledgling understanding of wine in Greece, but they've also collectively shown what I thought, well, maybe it's just Yannis, maybe they're not all like this, but everyone I've spoken to, so passionate about the wine they're making in Greece and so excited about the wine scene now. This is a really good time for wine in Greece.
I think there are many, many interesting things to discover in Greek wine, starting from, of course, all our indigenous grape varieties, but all the different appellations in Greece, from the mountains down to the islands, the Peloponnese, of course, which you know quite well. I think they are exciting times, and I think a younger generation is coming through with new ideas, a lot of energy, and it shows in the wines, I think.
Now, the wine that most of the world sat up and took notice about was your wine, and not just Vassaltis, but the Assyrtiko of Santorini. And that's really been leading the charge of Greek wine. How do you feel when you see the rest of Greece now following on? Is there a little bit of, oh, no, hang on, wine should be about us, it should be about Santorini? Or is there a great deal of pride that the rest of the country is playing a bit of catch-up?
I think there's... I'm very happy because, you know, in every country, there's always going to be a variety and an appellation that will lead the way. And every country needs it for someone to open the road for the others to follow. And I'm super proud Santorini has done that for the rest of Greece. And I'm really happy seeing the rest of the country being able to follow and show things that are worth talking about.
We're going to talk about them in some detail this evening, and not just with Yannis, because we've got three wonderful guests. So let's meet our trio who join us online from back in South Africa as Yannis and I live it up in downtown Athens. Ian Naudé joins us on the show. We also say a very warm welcome to Gary Jordan, who's got a big night of Cape Winemakers Guild business ahead of him, and Chris Mullineux as well, who's our newest Assyrtiko superstar. Guys, lovely to have you all on the show, and a very warm welcome. Ian, let's kick off with you, because I think you're now almost an honorary Greek. I believe you applied for a passport, and I met between the islands of Sifnos and Milos, I met about 15 different waitresses who were very excited that I knew Ian Naudé. I think he's heard that and he's disappeared from the screen. All right, we'll try and grab him back in a second. While we wait for Ian to return, then let's talk about the subject of Assyrtiko and start with a congratulations to you, Chris, because you have just released South Africa's very first Assyrtiko. It's been watched with a great deal of interest and quite a lot of excitement. Talk us through why. Was this just well, it sounds cool, let's do something a bit different, or is there a slightly deeper meaning to the plunge into the world of Greek wine?
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I mean, I think the last sort of 15, 20 years, South Africa, like Greece, has really kind of found its own identity in many regards, and we're doing amazing things with Shannon and other varieties. But at the same time, it's really important that we do look to the future and look at if things get warmer and drier as they are predicted to do. Maybe look at other varieties. So over the last 10 years, we've been planting a few other grape varieties from various countries, some from Portugal, some from Spain, some from France, and one of them has been Assyrtiko. So we weren't the first to plant it in South Africa, but it's really just done so well at our home vineyard of Roundstone. And the first crop that we took off of it was enough to make a barrel the last vintage, and it just really excited us so much that we bottled some, and we released it about 2 weeks ago, and it's been received exceptionally well. Really, the reception has been fantastic. So yeah, we planted a range of things, Verdelho and Macabeo and Vermentino, some of which have done really well, but the Assyrtiko particularly, it seems, for our warm, dry, and very windy terroir, is very happy and very, very much at home.
It sounds fairly simple. Assyrtiko likes some dry, warm weather. There's a bit of breeze. Right, we'll just plant some here in South Africa, and away we go. It's obviously a lot more complicated than that. Talk to me about the research process that goes into determining can this work with us, and what really led you to believe that this grape that has put Santorini on the global wine map can now hopefully have something of an impact in South Africa as well.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Gary will talk about this as well. He I think started looking into Assyrtiko probably way before us. But we looked at what other wine regions around the world kind of have a similar climate and to ours. So we're in the Swartland, which is about an hour north of Cape Town. It is a very dry place. We've got an intense amount of wind here. It's very, very sunny. So it really logically makes sense that we should plant grape varieties that originally come from a similar terroir, so that they're naturally adapted. But at the same time, it's not a guarantee that if you plant something from a similar terroir that it'll do well. So we've planted a range of different grape varieties. It's quite a lengthy process. The Assyrtiko, for instance, was not in South Africa 15 years ago. So the vines had to be brought into South Africa through quarantine. I know that Rissa Kruger, who's part of the started the Old Vine project, was also heavily involved in going and getting the clonal material in partnership with, I think it was with Vititech, into the country. And then it needs to go through quarantine. It needs to prove that there's no funny bugs in the material. And then eventually gets planted in mother blocks, and then wineries like ourselves can plant it. That's the first step. Then we have to make the wine eventually, and then we have to get it through SARWIS, which is the government body who kind of allows you to actually sell the wine at the end of the day. And that was also an interesting process for us, because once we bottled the wine and had it ready for sale, we had to get it certified, and we essentially had to send it to the government to have them taste the wine to say, yes, it tastes like Assyrtiko, which I'm not quite sure how many Greek wines they'd had before, but they seemed to like it and said, yes, that you guys can sell the wine. So it's in the background, there's a lot more complication going on. But at the end of the day, we're just extremely happy. It's a grape that seems very complete in the Swartland. It's very balanced. It's got amazing texture with a bright, fresh acidity. There's lovely fruit, but there's also a lot of complexity on the nose. Some sort of citrus aromatics, a little bit of flintiness, some beeswax. So it's quite actually a very classy variety, it seems, already in the Swartland. So it's something we're very excited by and already looking to plant some more.
Having a look in the cellar here at Innocent just before we started the show, I found some of your Kloof Street wine, Chris. I also found some of your Granite. I think there was a bit of Leo Passant as well. No sign of Assyrtiko just yet, but I know they're very keen to try it. So I'm sure there'll be some finding its way into this wine bar. And also some Jordan in due course. Gary, having a bit of fun and going on crazy experiments is not unusual for Team Jordan. If it's not making bubbles somewhere in England, it's coming up with wine in amphora in Stellenbosch, and there's always been a sense of invention to what you do at Jordan. What about Assyrtiko there? How did it cross your path, and what was the light bulb moment you thought, yep, this is something we're going to try?
Yeah, Dan, I think our sort of journey to Assyrtiko kind of started with Santorini, but it started many decades back. So 1983, Kathy and I were in Santorini. In fact, it was in one of the old Kalura that I asked her to wait for me. She was studying in France at the time, and I was in South Africa. And a few years later, after we'd been going out for the few years, we got married, went to UC Davis. But we always said that if we made wine together, we'd come back to Stellenbosch and plant Assyrtiko, not realizing, as Chris alluded to, how long it takes with quarantine. But in those bad old days, there was a 20-year quarantine period, which more recently lifted to 5, as long as you could prove that it came from a virus-free nursery. And he alluded to all the work that Rosa Kruger did with Vititec to be able to get it in. But we looked at this as a grape variety, not just because Kathy's ancestors come from Greece, and I think that had a little bit of romance to it for us. But with a more recent purchase of a north-facing part of the property for us, it was, I think, quite important to be able to find grape varieties that would handle really intense summer heat, as well as intense wind. And we also really close to the ocean, so no irrigation at all. And looking at producing them in these ancient Kalura style, or very simple trellising, if it's going to be that. I think that's what led us to plant, now under our belts, 3 hectares of it. So I've spent the last week now in Johannesburg launching the Assyrtiko all over with various sums of some of the top Johannesburg restaurants, and exciting to see the feedback that we've got from everyone.
Gary, one of the conversations we have on this show quite a lot, and I'm going to ask Yannis for his input in a moment, is about taking grapes that historically have a home somewhere else and how we make them in South Africa. Are we trying to replicate a Burgundy or a Bordeaux, or are we trying to make it on our own terms? And I think happily so, from my perspective, by and large, we're taking a Chardonnay, or we're taking a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Syrah, and we're making it on the terms of the terroir in South Africa from which it comes. What about Assyrtiko? Because when we drink Assyrtiko, we tend to think of the Santorini style. I've had Assyrtiko from northern Greece that has tasted very different. For me, Assyrtiko is what comes from places like Vassaltis. When you have approached it, and you've clearly taken a long time getting to the point where it is now ready to go to market, how have you approached what you want to make and what type of wine you want to be able to give people?
Well, we've looked at Assyrtiko from all around Greece, and there are some fantastic examples. And Yannis will agree with me when I say that the definitive Assyrtiko for us really comes from Santorini. You get great examples from all over Greece itself. But for us, I think that sort of proximity to the ocean, the type of terroir that it grows in, that sort of volcanic soil, that makes a massive difference. And we look at that sort of minerality, that real crispness, and that's the kind of style we'd really love to make. So hence, all our purchases of amphora the last couple of years, and our work with amphora on Chenin Blanc, that's all been leading up to what we want to do with Assyrtiko.
So that's Assyrtiko coming out of Stellenbosch, Yannis, which is slightly different to Santorini. You're going to be in Stellenbosch at Cape Wine a little later on this year. As you watch people like Gary, people like Chris producing Assyrtiko in very different parts of the world. What is your advice to them as someone who makes such acclaimed Assyrtiko in terms of taming this particular grape and turning it into something that works?
Look, I'm definitely not one to. I'm not the suitable person to give advice on, how other people should make their wines. Even our wine, it has a distinctive style and a character within Santorini, and wines at the end of the day are meant to express not only the place where they come from, but the taste and the philosophy of the person who makes them. So I don't have any particular advice to give to anyone who's planting Assyrtiko anywhere in the world. For us, our styles, we like to see more balanced wines. I know people like Assyrtiko for its acidity, but there's so much acidity that you have to tame the acidity into the wine. So we tend to work a lot with the lees. We tend to leave the wines on the lees for a long time to create richness in the body that will kind of camouflage the vast amounts of acidity that is in the wine. And I think what we've seen from our wines, despite the fact that we're a very young winery, is wines age very nicely. One of the few things I've regretted is jumping the gun and releasing our first vintage 6 months after it was after the vintage. If I could go back, I don't think I didn't have the financial means, to be honest, so I wouldn't be able to do it. But what I would have liked to have done is start releasing my Assyrtikos 1 year back. We do release various labels now, a couple of years back, but our main wines are always released straight after the vintage.
All right, some valuable advice there from somebody who's not giving advice. Very nicely done. The cellar here, I've had a bit of a wander around. I mentioned there was some of Chris's wine. I see just below me there's some Richard Kershaw wine that's available here. Some chocolate block, no surprises. Found a bottle of Delheim Pinotage. A great selection of Evans wine, some Tweenspoor and some Voetpad amongst them. And then about 300 bottles of wine from a guy called Ian Naudé. Now, we lost him a moment ago, so let's see if we can get Ian back. Ian, lovely to have you on the show, particularly because not only are you and Yannis really good friends, but you've fallen completely in love with Greece. Every time I speak to you and I mention Greece, your eyes just light up. I know the wines play a big role, but this country seems to have found a very special place in your heart, Ian Naudé.
And it's very true. Yes, I've never been to Greece, and Karen and myself decided we have to go to a different place, and we thought the Greek islands, and we did one or two of them, and I really didn't like it. And then the heavens opened, and I landed on Paros, which is my favorite place in the world right now. And it was one of those things where you feel you were here before. And 8 years later, until COVID came, we still went to Paros every year, religiously. And then it was one of those interesting things. I spoke to Yannis about it yesterday. I wish sometimes I could give something back to Greece, the islands. I don't know, to the Greeks. I don't know who. What the island Paros has given me. And it was incredible because Yannis I met through Greg Sherwood, the master guy in London that we all know. And it was just, we connected, and it felt like we were brothers. And we started working together. And the most beautiful thing was we started thinking immediately we should get Assyrtiko into South Africa. Yannis can tell you more about that. And then Yannis came to visit us in Cape Town, and it was like, it was meant to be. And we started thinking, how can we do something South Africa, compare with Greece, but all have our own identity still. And I think the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to show people in South Africa what a proper Assyrtiko looked like, because I tasted quite a few, and it was more a teeth cleaning white situation than drinking a proper wine. And then I met Yannis and I tasted his, and it was like, wow, this is what it is. This is how a proper Assyrtiko should taste. And I want to go and show people in South Africa that they don't have to go through all these other wines before they get to this one. And I just want to show them the top one. And it was incredible because I didn't think I would sell it that quickly, and every time I brought it in, it was literally sold out in 48 hours. And people are still calling me and say, listen, we still want some of that Assyrtiko. And then, as I said, COVID happened, and I got hold of Columba from the West Coast. And I started making the Columba, and I didn't know if that would ever sell or anything would happen with it. And then it ended up in the UK, and people said we never tasted a proper Columba. We tasted it in a distilled form, but never as a wine. And people said the closest thing I could think of, and this was top wine writers said, it tasted like Assyrtiko from the Greek islands. And it was like, yes, I made it. And it's so beautiful because I'm not trying to do anything that Yannis is doing. Yannis is not trying to do anything that I'm doing. But it's so beautiful if we could do these two wines together. And people taste Columba from Vredendal, West Coast, and a top-end Assyrtiko from Santorini. And now we can make this, the group bigger with Gary's wine and the Mullineux wine and just showcase people. And I think it's the right time, right place, and right people.
You've had a great deal of success, not just with bringing in the Vassaltis, but also with your own Columba that you mentioned, a 5-star wine from Plata. And in just a moment, Yannis and I are going to be drinking that together with the Santorini Assyrtiko and comparing the two of them. One of the things that says to me, Ian, is that if there are these striking similarities, that maybe that suggests there is a home for Assyrtiko in South Africa. As you listen to Chris talk, as you listen to Gary talk, making their own wines, do you think that this is a grape that in 5-10 years' time, we're going to be seeing a selection of South African vineyards have as part of their regular offering?
Then it's a difficult question, but I think it's one of those cultivars that almost got really popular in a very short while. And I think if people like the Mullineux and the Jordans are putting their money behind something, there must be something to it. And I think with our Columba and their Assyrtikos and Yannis's Assyrtiko, the pool is getting bigger. And I think if you go up the West Coast, where we are going pretty soon, and looking for soil where we think this is pretty much the style that Assyrtiko wants. And as Gary said so rightly, it's that cooler, colder breezes from the ocean that gives you that salinity that Santorini gives you, but also complements Assyrtiko very much. And I honestly think people are getting tired of the big five, of the normal wines, of things. And I think South Africa is starting to open itself up for Vermentino, Assyrtiko. And I mean, if you just go to Eben, who's always 10 steps ahead of all of us, he's planted a lot of Mediterranean style things that I think South Africans are showcasing. We're so much more than just what you thought we were. And look at these ones. And I don't think, I love what you said in the beginning. I don't think we should try and copy Assyrtiko from Santorini especially. We should do terroir-driven Assyrtikos and show the world what we've done with Chenin Blanc from France. We're actually getting into our own stride now, where we say, look at all our different terroirs, look at all our beautiful Chenin Blancs. And I honestly think because we're a summer country, Assyrtiko and Vermentino is one of those great varieties that people would love.
Well, as you say that, we have a returning Greek with another bottle. Let's show everybody what you've got there. This is the Colombard, the Langpad, 5 stars. Platter, and that's only because they couldn't give it 6, which we're going to sample. We get the other wines poured out there. Let's head back to our other guests while Yannis pauses as we prepare to taste them, and go back to Gary. It's taken you a very long time, by your own admission, Gary, to produce the wine. What was the delay? What held you back, and why is now the right time to be producing Assyrtiko at Jordan?
Dan, I think as Chris mentioned, the lead time, the quarantine period was enormous. I mean, initially 20 years. And then not only that, it had to get added onto the South African varietal list, which is kind of got to go through Department of Agriculture. It's an act of Parliament to change these things. So it all takes time. And Parliament's got far more important things to do than sign off what the Department of Agriculture suggests. I mean, we both, Mullineux and ourselves, scrambled around the sort of days before harvest, trying to get the Department of Agriculture to put their head on a block and say, yes, it will be on the list, because it was literally the day before we harvested it at Jordan that made it. And again, you know, when you look at even trying to get it certified, there were no examples that anybody from the Wine and Spirit Board could use. So they had to have a reference of, you know, other wines from around the world to be able to reference that. But I think, you know, the impetus really came with sort of more modern South Africa, being able to do things faster, and climate change certainly helped with that. So it was the purchase of a new 20-hectare piece of land, north-facing for us, so obviously in the southern hemisphere, that's the warmest side, and it's at least 5 degrees warmer than any other place at Jordan, despite the fact that we've got these cool breezes, and we're looking over the Indian Ocean side, being False Bay really close to us, and Table Bay as well. Rocky, no irrigation. What better variety than Assyrtiko to plant? And I mean, even from a geeky point of view, Yannis will be interested to hear this, because I mean, you've seen where the vineyards are planted, but post bottling, we had 8 grams of acid and 3 pH. Now that's something quite incredible for one of the latest ripening varietals that we could use in the Western Cape, and fantastic, really nice minerally flavors, texture and structure, even from first crop vines.
Many things I love about this conversation, Gary, but the fact that you've been making wine for many years now, and yet the excitement, I can see your eyes lighting up as you talk about this. It's a new challenge, it's a new space, and it's one that clearly you're absolutely relishing.
Yeah, it is. You know, we in the last year we launched our timepiece range, honoring my dad planting those early varietals in, you know, more than 35 years ago at Jordan, and that forms now part of the Old Vine series. So it's kind of that we were able to then buy amphora to be able to emphasize just the variety there, and it's those slopes that you were looking at in that photograph. That's exactly the slope that my dad planted initially in 1982. So yeah, and being able to use things like amphora, we actually specially went out and we bought a basket press this last vintage, just so that we could press the Assyrtiko, because, you know, to try and put it into a 10 or 20 ton press, which we had the choice of at Jordan, just wasn't going to work for this vintage.
40 years on since those vines were planted, and it's still change and new adventures at Jordan, as there are at Mullineux. Talk to me, Chris, about the response to this and about how you and Andrea have felt this first vintage gone. We know they're very young vines. We know it's very much the introductory phase, and I'm sure by your own admission, you're finding your feet a little in terms of making it. What have you thought about what you've produced, and what have people said to you so far about their enjoyment of the wine?
Yeah, I mean, the feedback has been incredible. We could have, I mean, it sold literally in half a day. We could have made 50 times more, and it would still have sold. So the feedback has been absolutely remarkable. And, you know, Swartland, where we are, is a region where generally blending is the kind of the done thing. You know, we have our Old Vines White, and even the Kloof Shannon that you have there in the store is a blend of different vineyards together. So really in our area, being warm and dry, blending is kind of the secret to making amazing wine on a consistent basis. And that's why we've planted a whole range of new varieties. And we've bottled the Assyrtiko just because on its own, it was such a complete wine. And we haven't done that with the Verdelho. We haven't done that with the Vermentino. But the Assyrtiko really just on its own was just so complex, so balanced, and so interesting that, you know, we were like, wow, we have to share this with people and show them how amazing it is. And you've done a few tastings with Andrea, my wife, you'll know. she she won't put anything in the bottle that's not insanely good. Our name's on the bottle, so it has to be amazing. So yeah, it just seems to be a variety that's very happy and very, very at home here. And I think what you guys have chatted about also is really interesting. It's not so much about trying to imitate what's going on in Greece or specifically in Santorini, where we are. It's not right next to the ocean. We're further inland, so we don't have exactly the same climate. So we really very much need to find our own style and our own expression of the grape. But so far, with what we've experienced, it's very exciting and very, very promising. So yeah, I've tasted the wine. I think I was one of the very first people to buy the wines that Ian brought in. So thank you, Ian. And whenever I'm at Provine or one of the shows, normally the Greek stand is where the Greek hall is where I go and taste first. So yeah, I've got a pretty good understanding of the styles of Assyrtiko in Greece, but we have some similarities, but it's quite, in Swartland especially, quite textural. We've got a lovely mid palate to go with that incredibly high acidity that Assyrtiko has. So very exciting for us.
The Assyrtiko journey very much just beginning in South Africa. It is well underway in Greece. It's well underway to the point that I asked the question, Yannis, how difficult does it then make you to do other stuff? Because the moment you mention Greek wine to anybody, 9 people out of 10 will tell you, yes, Assyrtiko from Santorini. Now, Greek wine is not just about it. That is what leads the way, as we've said, but you yourself make other wines. How difficult is it for you to sell wine other than Assyrtiko to people? And how important is it for Greece to have more to offer, not just in terms of more than Santorini, but in terms of other styles of wine, other varietals?
I think what my generation of winemakers, the task we face is to introduce Greek wine to people who are not familiar with it, to open the door. And then once the door is open, people are very open in trying other stuff. So I think people are very hesitant. And, one example I always think of, about 5-6 years ago, there weren't any direct flights from the UK to Greek islands. And ever since British Airways and EasyJet and Ryanair got flights out of Heathrow straight to Santorini and Mykonos and Crete, the amount of people coming has increased, and the amount of people trying Greek wines at their birthplace has increased. And people back in the UK keep telling me how much the demand for Greek wines has increased. So, the difficult part is to get them to feel comfortable with Greek wines. Same way we would we're not very experienced on Georgian wines or Moldovan wines, and we always think, okay, what does Moldovan wine taste like? So I think once that is done, people are much more open to try other things. And then I think this is where you need the second wave of wines, Greek wines, that would offer not only quality but value as well. Because don't forget, Santorini wines are quite pricey for an introduction to Greek wine. It's our biggest task is that when someone goes to a restaurant in New York and wants to try our wine that he's never tried before, he has to pay $120 to try it, and few people will take a risk on a $120 bottle.
And they'll probably be even more reluctant to take a risk on a wine that is not a Santorini Assyrtiko. Greg Sherwood, who's watching the show between his 4th and 5th free lunches of the day in London. I love a bit of Assyrtiko, but actually that's yesterday's news. It's all about light, fresh Greek reds. Now watch this space. Now, I would agree with that in part. I think there are a lot of other really interesting Greek whites that we don't know nearly as much about. I've been drinking a fair bit of Vidiano while I've been here. Some Moscofilero I've been discovering. Also drinking some of the Muscats and some really interesting stuff. But Greg has a very good point there, because in terms of the light reds, and forgive my pronunciation, I think it was some Limniano, which I had from Oinoscent just yesterday, wine that's got that lightness of touch, but without sacrificing substance, and wine that in that broader kind of Grenache, Pinot Noir, Cinsault space retains that red fruit, retains that burst of liveliness, and with a little bit of coolness, the kind of wine you can chill for 10-15 minutes in the fridge and drink perfectly in summer. This is, as Greg suggests, a space that Greece is really getting a handle on.
I think, what we've seen over the past 15 years in Greece. I mean, there's always been a huge European effect on Greek winemaking. And if you came to Greece 20 years ago, apart from the Retsina, it was all about Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and Sauvignon Blanc and all these international grape varieties, because we were trying to imitate what the French were doing. And with the Greek crisis, this kind of, and Innocent, where we're sitting now, is a kid of the Greek crisis. Everyone we became introverts, mainly because we didn't have the money to buy, foreign wines, but we started supporting local wines, local varieties. And that's why you see so many Greek varieties becoming more and more popular over the last decade. And I think the red wines, we used to copy what the French used to do, big wines, over extracted, a lot of barrel, it had to be like minus degrees for you to try, or you needed like a big leg of lamb to try those wines, which is, it doesn't stick with the foods that we have here, with the environment, the climate that we have here. We need more light reds, more summery reds, delicate reds, not so jammy. And I think this is starting to come through, and we've experimented a lot on that front, because we want to offer something that goes with the food that we offer, and goes with the climate where it grows. So we're working on something exciting, and we sent the bottle to Greg, and he wrote a very nice piece the other day. But I think more and more colleagues of mine are starting to go that way.
Let's see if the Greek High Commissioner to Paros agrees. Ian, I've got no doubt you spent a bit of time at the Moraitis winery, which I visited a couple of times in Paris. They make a lovely Assyrtiko amongst others. But you will also have tried some of the reds, possibly some at Omega 3, where 4 different restaurants, Ian asked me to pass on their regards to you via several waitresses. Your discoveries in Greece, has there been a bit of red wine that's caught your eye? Is this a style of wine that you feel is going to broaden our global understanding and appreciation of Greek wine?
Then you remember this is taped. I'm just worried. Then you know what? I had the privilege to go meet Yannis at the winery for the first time, and I hope you met his winemaker. I always say you can't go too far wrong in Greece. If you say the word Yannis or Maria, you'll be pretty much correct. His winemaker is also Yannis, and I met this guy, and I was blown away. I couldn't believe the energy, what this guy has to offer. And it's interesting, like we all winemakers do. He took me through the winery, and we tasted things, and at the end he said, "I've got something for you to taste." And I tasted this, and I had that moment where it's like, wow, what is this? And he said, no, don't talk about this. It's just an experiment. And I said, it's one of the best wines I've tasted in many years. And I feel this is Greece. This is Santorini. This is Assyrtiko is a given. You have to do that. You have to make it proper. You've got all the tools to make a world-class and the best Assyrtiko. But what else can you do? And he showed me what he's done. And I was honestly blown away by this wine. And it's the 2 cultivars that I have to drink quite a lot to pronounce it correctly. And Yannis can explain that. And I went to Yannis and I said, this is one of your best wines. And he said, no, it's something we're experimenting with. And I said, I could be wrong. Let's send it to the king of lunch and let him see if what he thinks. And Greg tasted it and he said, this is exactly what I think Greek wine should be. And it was one of those great times where you find something where they actually don't believe in it. But I think it's going to be one of those wines where I can't wait to bring some of that wines to South Africa for people like Chris and Evan and Jordan and all of those people to taste and say, you know what? Yes, it's Assyrtiko, but look at what the ground-breaking wines these guys are doing. And they're in the forefront. And they're kind of fearless because, I mean, we've got 300 years history. They've got thousands of years of history. Nobody is doing something that exciting outside of what was expected of them. But when I tasted this and I saw Yannis in the winery, and I thought, wow, I'm the lucky one to be able to taste this and to see the energy that these people are putting in and the groundbreaking things that they're doing. And I think I hope he's making you taste it tonight, Dan, because I would really like to hear your view on this as well.
Well, I can tell you I was doing some tasting last night. Lisa Harlow, who's watching from the UK, saying even young, lightly extracted Zino Mavro can be excellent, especially in summer. One of my go-to summer reds. Well, I had some of this last night. Really fun label, Zino Mavro, the raw referring to wine, not just organic, but made with minimal intervention by the winemaker. We chilled this ever so slightly, just as Lisa said, on a hot night in Athens. It was an absolute delight. Chris, it speaks to a style of wine I think we're seeing a lot more of in South Africa, and you and Andrea are very much amongst this space where we're getting a lot of reds that are leaning more towards a style of elegance and of a certain restraint, and not always the big blockbuster reds for which Stellenbosch has long been famous. Still very much a space for those. We make them so well, but it is an alternative spin on some of our bigger red varietals. Have you had a look amongst the different grapes that you are producing at Greek options? Do you think there are some Greek reds that could join Assyrtiko in appearing on the South African wine horizon?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the challenge in South Africa, again, going back to what Gary and I have been talking about, is quarantine and bringing these varieties in. So there are a couple of new red varieties that are available, and we will be planting them as well. But yeah, we've just, Assyrtiko has been the first, and having tasted the Zino Mavros, I think, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. You get beautiful brightness, crispness, this red fruit, almost like we would get with Carignan here in the Swartland. And again, as a blending component, can be extremely useful in a warm, dry place like we have here in the Swartland. So yeah, we're constantly thinking about the future and what works now, maybe in 50 years, may be struggling a bit, and help from varieties like these that bring brightness, freshness, and just love the sun, love dryness, are going to be, I think, extremely important. And one of the other things is, I think selling varieties may be difficult. People might not want to pronounce some of the names of the varieties, but what we're lucky with in the Swartland is we're normally selling the region, we're selling blends, and it's nice and geeky to know there's some Assyrtiko in a blend, but the real kind of benefit for us is using it as a component to add complexity and freshness and energy to the wine. So they're definitely, we're looking at any and all options that we think can bring brightness and freshness into our wines. Yeah.
And what about the Jordan Empire? Is there a Jordan Assyrtiko, for example, on the horizon, Gary?
We're definitely looking at that sort of thing, and have spent a lot of time both in the Peloponnese and on different islands, tasting through a lot of the wines. I've actually been to Yannis and a few other people had suggested for us to go and look at some of the nurseries out in the Peloponnese, where many of the cuttings are grafted and propagated. It's the world is your oyster. It really depends on how long it takes to get it into the industry, and as Chris said, there's lots of space for it. I think it's an open market at the moment. It's definitely something we're looking at.
I think that's a wonderful way to sum up where the Greek varietals sit in the South African landscape. And probably for me, the best part of this whole journey the last 4 weeks has been seeing Yannis, how exciting Greek wine is, as well as how exciting South African wine is, see them coming together. I want to get a final thought from you. Before I do that, would be remiss of me, first of all, Gary, as a lead member of the Cape Winemakers Guild. I know you're on duty a little later on this evening. Big auction coming up, some lovely wine by all accounts. I will be tasting as soon as I get home. But not just a wonderful selection of wine, but another reminder of how important the Guild is and how important the work that the Guild does is.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. We have a great evening tonight. We've got a lot of our Guild proteges here as well. We're busy showing wines, and we'll have the sort of Guild dinner this evening, showcasing a lot of that with a charity auction happening tonight as well.
All right, Gary doing terrific work with the Guild, as of course does Andrea Mullineux, the other half of Team Mullineux, until recently chair of the Guild. So I know she'll be hard at work this evening as well. And basking in glory, as of course do you, Chris, at more amazing news. 100 points for the Oinoscent. You guys have got some pretty good thumbs up from critics over the years, and very richly deserved. But 100 points for this magical sweet wine of yours, even by your high standards, that must be pretty special.
Yeah, no, it's it's mind blowing, really. The Oinoscent particularly is a wine that's it takes a lot of time, a lot of patience. It's made in a Solera, so it's now 15 years old. So it's been a journey that we started back in 2007, and yeah, the wine's just in a really beautiful place, and yeah, it's just super rewarding that all that time and patience and kind of investment in a way. Is tasting so beautiful, but yeah, obviously it's just awesome that consumers and critics are enjoying it as much as we do, because it's a very, very, very special wine.
I opened the bottle of the Oinoscent number 2 over dinner a few weeks ago. I then foolishly went to the bathroom, and my dinner guest had finished it by the time I got back. No surprises. I'm going to try and bribe the Mullineux for a bottle of the number 3 before too long. Ian, final one for you just to wrap up. It's great you're bringing in this Assyrtiko, but it's not detracting from the fact that you're continuing to not just make great wine, but clearly have so much fun making wine. You've been making it for a good few years now. What is it for Ian Naudé that keeps you going, that keeps you jumping out of bed in the morning, coming up with new ideas, and pouring so much passion, so much soul into the wine that you give us?
Yeah, it's one of those wonderful jobs where you're as good as your last bottle of wine. And for me, it is always one of those things. People ask me, why Colombar, why Sanso, why all these things? And as I said on your show before, I don't look for these things. I'm sitting in Citrusdal at the moment. That's why the signal is not that good. I'm looking for interesting grapes. I'm tired of making the same things over and over. And the most beautiful thing for me is it's not just South Africa. You meet people like Yannis, who's kind of your Greek brother, and you see what they're doing. And just when you think you're happening something there, a new world opens. And I'm quite excited about the partnership with me and Yannis as well, with the Greek and the South African wines, because I think both of us has got a lot to learn from each other and to give to each other. And yeah, winemaking is one of those things. Every morning is something new, and I love that part of winemaking.
And we love the results that it produces. One of them is sitting in front of me. Before we say goodbye, Yannis, before I ask you one last question, we're drinking the Colombard next to your Assyrtiko. Maybe not twins, but definitely very close first cousins.
There are some great similarities amongst the two wines. Of course, there are great differences, but yes, they could be cousins, not twins, but cousins. Yes.
All right, they can both be found in South Africa if you're lucky. I know the Vassaltis is now at Marble if you're up in Johannesburg for dinner, so get a bottle of each and compare them. Yannis, I first came to South Africa 10 years ago. My then new Greek wife introduced me to this wonderful country and introduced me to wine that was okay to pretty good. The whites definitely leading the way. The red wines I would sidestep if I could. 10 years on, I find a completely different space. The white wines are electric, but the reds, and especially the kind of styles we've spoken of today, are just so much better. And I get the sense that Greece has really discovered a space that it's comfortable with, in terms of we're not going to try and copy other people. We're going to make one on our own terms and do so with a huge amount of success, which is what you're doing now. What about 10 years from now, when I come back? Where would you like to see Greece be? What does Greek wine still need to do to improve, to take advantage of the opportunity you have today?
I think the main thing is we need to focus. Stick with the things that we do right. Get rid of the things that we don't do right. And be consistent and be reliable. I think, experiments are very nice, but, I always say that anyone can make a great bottle of wine for 1 year out of one parcel if it's one barrel, but upping the bar at good volumes consistently and at a good price is what will help the Greek industry become a bit more widely accepted, rather than something that is very fancy. Now we're living a moment because we're fancy, we're a bit exotic, but once the novelty wears off, there has to be something there for Greek wine to stick and to stay, and for people to go back to Greek wines.
Some lessons for South Africa, but also I think some lessons Greek can take from South Africa. But as it stands, just a really exciting place.
Can I just add, because Ian touched upon it, and Gary's wines and Chris's wines are fantastic wines. And through my friendship with Ian, I started looking out for South African wines here in Greece, and especially after my trip to South Africa a couple of years ago, I drank so many nice wines, but more importantly, I saw so many young and energetic people. And I don't know if your viewers know, but we recently had 2 Elsenburg School graduates with us, the Harvest. And hats off to Lorraine as well, and to anyone supporting Elsenburg. These girls were fantastic. But I've come to understand and to realize the lack of South African wines here in Greece. And I'm so happy to see that Chris has got an agent recently. Hopefully, Gary will have one soon. I've had some success with Ian's wines here in the country. But I really have to congratulate everyone and thank them, because they've given us a lot by looking at them and their hard work and their inspiration and all the Old Vines project and so many things. Hats off, guys. Congratulations. I have to say it because,
And I'm very glad you did. And it's a lovely way to wrap up not just today's show, but to wrap up my month in Greece. So big thank you this evening to Gary, as well as to Chris and to Ian. Guys, thank you so much. Ian, I know you'll be back here again soon. It's your second home. Chris, I know you and Andrea are plotting a trip. And Gary, you seem to spend half your life here anyway. And I can see why, because I love the place as well. So, guys, thank you so much. I've got some Assyrtiko to taste from both of you, Gary and Chris, when I'm back. And Ian, you'll probably have released 11 new wines by the time I'm back as well. So, guys, have a lovely evening, and thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
The wine's on its way. The first pallet to Greece.
We can't wait for it to touch down. Gary Jordan from Jordan Wines, along with Chris Mullineux from the Mullineux Family Wines, and Ian Naudé. And you were dishing out some thanks, so yes, I will do the same. Thank you for introducing me to so many great people, so many wonderful wines, so many terrific wine estates. I've got to run this past my wife, but we're hoping to be in Santorini next year on our Greek trip.
We're looking forward to it. We're looking forward.
Before then, we'll see you at Cape Wine a little later on this year.
Perfect.
So there we go, from the Innocent Wine Bar in Athens, where I'm surrounded by wine from around the world, but including a fair chunk of South African wine. It's still a bit of a rarity, but increasingly less so as people like Yannis celebrate South African wine, just as we're seeing more Greek wine start to filter its way into South Africa. That does it for this evening. I will be back in the Dan Really Likes Wine Cellar in Johannesburg on Monday as we begin the build-up to Cape Wine in October. It's an exciting last stretch of the year for South African wine. From Greece, this is Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, together with Yannis from Vassaltis, saying a very goodbye from the Innocent Wine Bar. Cheers.
Cheers.
To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.